But there's no mandate to do. I mean, that's just society speaking, or society changing a little bit. There's no mandates. I mean, it's not a totalitarian government, obviously. Clearly, they're very open. But government, the form of government is what? Is it is it a democracy? Is it really? Yeah.
Yes, and you know, they do vote and have elections and that sort of thing. They have a parliament that's, I don't know, very partisan, which we may notice a little something about.
Well, right now, we've had funny shifts, of course, in our own government, but yes, very partisan.
And also thinking about, like, the loyalty to family, and another thing that struck me as a huge difference was the integrity or trustworthiness of people. I mean, I could go into a dance club in downtown Tokyo, leave my purse on the table, and go to the dance floor and dance, and come back and it's undisturbed. I mean, people are just incredibly honest there, and, you know, coming back, I've seen a difference in that, too. Someone earlier, one of your directors, I believe, mentioned to me his motorcycle had been stolen.
Yes, yes.
Clutch the pearl. You know,
I know, yeah.
It's such a stark difference for me to come back, and, you know, it's not yours. Why would you touch it? And so over there, they're very upstanding, and that's probably one of the places you could still make contracts on a handshake or a bow.
Right.
As it is, you know, and they would stand up for it.
So many large companies based in Japan that have such an impact, like the one your father worked for formerly, I mean, like Toyota. And to think about the impact and the amount of sales in this country that have impacted, obviously, them dramatically, helped many of the companies in Japan flourish. To think that some of America has not had a big impact on that country. It's do you see influences, big influences of McDonald's, bigger than life arches or anything over there that really stands out? I mean, do you pass some things and feel, oh, I'm home, or any sense of that?
I never had a, oh wow, I feel like I'm in the States moment. Right. No, I never had one of those, but, you know, there's definitely a prevalence of fast food, which, you know, the dichotomy between the older generation and the younger generation kind of welcomes that Western influence. They want to wear Levi's that are outrageously priced. You know, they want to eat at McDonald's. And the older generation's kind of dragging their heels, kicking and screaming. And so, you know, 7-Eleven is probably the biggest example of a presence in Japan. So they're on nearly every street corner.
Oh, come on. Like here, Eagles, Wings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Without exaggeration.
7-Eleven on every street corner.
But let me tell you how much better they are than American 7-Elevens. You can go in there and eat lunch, and it's incredible. Fresh sushi, great rice and noodle dishes, and, I mean, all sorts of good daily made foods. And so they're quite respectable, actually. And
if you're not joshing, the reason they could have one on every street corner is because there's so many folks between each street corner? I mean, there's just, you're going up and they're packed in, is that right?
Theoretically. And people rely on those sorts of convenience stores a lot more than we do. They're not gas stations, they're, you know, shopping spots that you hit on the way home.
Is there a lot of driving over there? I mean, are gas stations prevalent? I mean, is there we're thinking about the bullet train, and I know I want to get on that. Excuse me, I'm just so fascinated. We probably should have just made this interculturalism rather than
we'll get around
abroad.
To the program. There is a lot of driving. You know, of course, the farther you go out in the countryside, the more sparse train stations are. And so in my town, I had a car. I actually worked once at a high school in the mountains. It was about 45 minutes from my home. So it was best if I just drove there as opposed to bicycle, bus, train, another bus, and that sort of thing. Interestingly, self-serve gas stations are very, very rare. So I didn't pump gas for about 3 years, which is interesting. Yet they have very low unemployment in Japan. It's because they do a good job at carving out niches for, you know, senior citizens or people who would otherwise be retired. Or so yeah, there is some driving, but in the cities, not recommended.
You know, Ronaldo, who opened the show for us to get us started this morning, mentioned that he's one of 7 children. Big families, small families? Are they all no more than 2 children, 3 children, or did you see families that had 7 and 8 kids?
Not 7 and 8 children per se, but such an exciting time, I think, when I was in Japan, because I mentioned before a tipping point, and now more than ever, women are waiting till later and later to have children, so they're not having as large of families. You know, generations ago, you would see 2 or 3 brothers, 3 or 4 sisters in a household. But now I would say 2 children on average, not extremely large families, but they stay very close-knit. So the aunts and uncles and grandmothers and great-grandmothers, you know, lots of them often live in the same home together. So it's practically a big family.
The prefecture or the state you were in there, Tiffany, or when we think about homes, of course, even small, or live in an apartment complex that you talked about there in Columbia, are apartment complexes common, or are homes spread out as you go further from the big cities? When we think about all these developments here in the Myrtle Beach area.
You know, I hate to generalize about it, but in my experience, I lived in apartments, even in Joliet City in Niigata Prefecture, which is like Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Fairly a small town, you know, relatively. So there are apartment complexes, no high-rises. But actually, family homes are probably more popular in the sense they get passed down generation to generation. So I would visit people, and it was the home that their great-grandparents built, or, you know, so it's kind of nice to see the history and stuff that, I don't know, gathered in those sorts of places. And they have shrines in their homes, Buddhist shrines that have been there for decades and decades.
When we think about, of course, for many Americans, they think about either very positive or negative memories of just Japan in general, even older folks possibly. Are there any sense now if there's a welcoming? I mean, obviously, many of the younger folks want you to be in the classroom. They're thrilled to learn English. Did you have a sense that there was ever any disdain for Americanism or for Americans, the Western culture?
I did. And I must say that I had some moments where I was like, I'm obviously not wanted here. I should just go home.
I know, yeah.
But, you know, as with traveling and living anywhere, it was in turns exciting and frustrating, and I wanted to pull my hair out, and then it would be the most eye-opening experience I'd ever had. And, you know, there were times when older people who have a little harder ways of thinking, I think, not so malleable, not so open to interculturalism, you know, they wouldn't sit next to you on the train, or if you see a gaijin, which is the word for a foreigner, it's kind of a derogatory term. It actually means outside person. You know, I look like an outside person, so it doesn't matter. I've been there 3 years, and I'm fairly comfortable using the language. And just to take a glance, and they're nervous. They don't have much self-confidence. They don't engage very well with foreign people, a lot of the older folks. So there were times when I did feel not so welcome. And I had the great opportunity to go to Hiroshima, which is, they have an atom bomb museum there, and it was very moving, but I was surprised that was probably one of the places that I felt most welcome. They were incredibly gracious that Americans want to go there and see what happened and see their side of it.
That's fascinating. We got about 5 minutes, Tiffany, I hate to say. And, you know, there's so many fascinating things, some of the points of interest, experiences for you that really stick out. I think one of them I saw on here that obviously stuck out there close at hand, where you were involved with some other teachers in putting together, was it a charitable play? Was it a
It was a musical. Although I'm not musical, as long as we don't count karaoke, because that's just like a rite of passage in Japan. So we put together a musical that performed around the prefecture. I mean, it took months and months to...
You traveled around? Wow.
And actually played in venues, I mean, most of them larger than high school gymnasiums. Some of them were orchestral venues, and so these are pretty big spaces. We produced, directed, created all the props, marketed, you know, performed in it, and then took all of the money that we raised and purchased school supplies, had some supplies donated, but also wood, nails, paint, and that sort of thing. And there are about 35 of us, including some Japanese kids who could also speak English. They were good go-betweens, and we were doing the marketing and stuff, liaisons. A few of us, about 15, eventually traveled to Papua New Guinea, which is a little south of Indonesia. I'm not familiar with where it's at. And it's an incredibly rural third world country at this point. And we went to a village there in the Waria River Valley. It was actually a school called AU Primary. So we built desks and re-roofed buildings and painted and donated school supplies and just played and lived and hung out with these families. That it was incredibly humbling and moving to see how little they had and how darn happy they are. You know, how well they get along with each other. And
that's great.
It was incredible.
You know, as you sit back now and think about Seattle or Austin or Brazil or being anywhere, are there thoughts that maybe you want to go back, you want to be there, or is there something pulling at any heartstrings saying, other than just sharing that story right there, anything that's saying, I need to get back there, or is there anything you miss particularly?
Yeah, I miss great sushi, great cheap sushi.
Great cheap sushi,
You know, I do have a special place in my heart for Japan, having spent time there on multiple occasions. But also, I've got to itch of the wanderlust, you know. There's so many places in the world I haven't been and haven't experienced. So I don't have any immediate plans to go back there.
Right. Are you going to grab your dad and take him on some of these trips? Can you pull him out? Yeah.
Well, he's actually German by descent, and so I'm working on him. I'm convinced we need to go to Oktoberfest next year. Yes.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. You know, as you think of any experiences that stick out, of course, that's a special one. Just if you, as you think back there, obviously, if you're not going to be living back there, anything that you want to take from your 3+ years there to the U.S. and try to share, to spread here, whether in Seattle or Austin or anywhere, even in Sockasty, Myrtle Beach.
You know, there are some superficial things, like I don't let anyone wear shoes in my house anymore. Ooh. You know, you take them off at the door. I'm interested in their interest in physicality. I mean, even up into their 80s, they're very physical, mountain climbing and that sort of thing.
Really?
And actually, one of the things that I've really tried to impress upon people coming back is their environmentalism. They're incredible recyclers. I had 8 garbage cans when I was there. And like the first and third Tuesday, you could throw this away, the second. You know, it's because they don't have a lot of space for landfills, and they recycle, they take care of their natural habitat. I mean, so that's something that I think we should do a better job of, something akin to what they do.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Tiffany, thanks so much for being with us this morning. I'm sorry we've run out of time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Greg.
Probably can't get any great cheap sushi here at Villa Romana, but you can get an amazing Italian meal. Get back here. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Tiffany Jackson coming up next. If you've been sitting here the last 30 minutes, you've probably been saying, Greg, go ahead and ask her about Buddha. Ask her about earthquakes. Ask her about tsunamis. Well, why didn't you ask her that, Greg? We had this great time here, 25 minutes with this young lady, and you didn't ask her about Buddhist temples or traveling around or doing other things or tsunamis that are impacting the country, earthquakes. What's happening? Take the time to write this down. JapanByStorm.blogspot.com. JapanByStorm.blogspot.com. Now, I know a lot of folks are saying, I don't go online, I don't do anything. I'm not going to take the time. You can go to the library, just go in, JapanByStorm.blogspot.com. Learn about what it was like 3 years over there. The experiences, of course, we didn't even have a chance to talk about her amazing gastronomical evening there in Tokyo before coming back to the States. A lot that happened over a 3-year period, making a difference for folks, opening up America as well as opening up Japan to Tiffany. It was an experience she'll never forget. Check her out online, JapanByStorm.blogspot.com.